think why I like to open up with people about how my political and personal beliefs have changed is to then hopefully resonate with people a bit easier. And for people to think, well, I'm not perfect in any way conceivable as well, and had a lot of beliefs that I now think they're wrong, and did things where I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. And it's not about, I think vegans and people that are in this space get accused of being really preachy, lecturing people, and like you do switch off. And like that was the issue I had. Like I did switch off for ages. It took a year of being bombarded with seeing things to change. What changed for me really was feeling hypocritical, like campaigning against fox hunting in particular, but then I was still eating animals, and I was like, the two and two don't go hand in hand.
Hi, Rob.
Hello. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm good, yeah.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sponsoring the podcast as well. It's given a really good introduction to our listeners on the charity and the work you do. Now they can actually hear it from you direct, which is great. I kind of want to start with going back to the beginning, because I know that you've had like an extensive experience in the charity world already in your kind of personal life, career, and it kind of started with Keep the Ban, because I actually followed that back in the day. So can you talk to me about Keep the Ban and how that's evolved into now Protect the Wild and your experience in the charity world?
Indeed, yeah. Feels a long time ago now. A third of my life ago. Well, I was 16.
Okay.
Saw a petition online about fox hunting. I didn't really know it went on. So in theory, I would have been classed as one of these sort of towny characters that wasn't aware of what was going on in the countryside. And then, stumbled across a petition. This was at the time when David Cameron's government was in power, and they were looking to legalise fox hunting. I was outraged by that. I was like, how are they trying to sort of turn back time? If anything, we should be going forwards here and eliminating these cruel blood sports, not trying to go back 100 years was how I saw it. Signed that petition. There was a Facebook group attached to it. Joined that group with loads of like-minded other people within that space that were also just basically angry against these potential attempts to repeal the 2004 Hunting Act, which is the ban on hunting with wild mammals. And from there, I sort of noticed there was a gap in the space. At the time, the hashtag was Keep the Ban, so keep the ban on hunting, and that was what Ricky Gervais and a lot of other big celebs were using as the sort of hashtag for the campaign. And there wasn't a specific page sort of leading that fight for that single cause issue. So I set up a Facebook page. I think a week or two later, it got to like 10,000 followers. So there was clearly a demand and appetite for a movement to be sort of started. Here we are in 2023, and we've gone through a lot of evolution and change. I've since graduated uni. I mean, at that time, it was very much a passion project that I worked on for hours every day, never saw it becoming something that would be my full-time occupation. But as things have evolved, it's got to the point where it's grown, the audience has got bigger, and sadly, it's something I have to spend every day trying to fight against people that are killing wild animals, because it's still prevalent, it still goes on. It goes on a lot more than what people think. And then a year or so ago now, we changed our name to Protect the Wild to encompass a broader range of issues, because sadly there's so many forms of wildlife persecution going on. It's not just fox hunting, it's not just this single issue anymore of trying to stop people legalising fox hunting. There's people chasing and killing deer, there's people setting dogs upon hares, There's millions of birds being shot and blasted out of the sky for so-called fun. Every year, there's badgers being persecuted, badger baiting. You've got the badger cull. When you start unearthing the different forms of abuse and cruelty towards wild animals in the UK, you realise how big of an issue there is. So yeah, that's a quick summary-ish.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's your job, it's your permanent job now, but it's such a shame that it has to be that way, and it's a shame that it's needed, because it's so cruel. And I'm an animal lover. I always have been. Since I was a child, I've been really sensitive to this kind of stuff. Is that the same for you then? Have you been quite sensitive to this? Or was it like your eyes were opened?
It's quite interesting. I've never said this publicly or outwardly because I feel a sense of guilt about saying it, but I used to be quite cold. Growing up in my teenage years especially, I was quite right-wing. I was very stubborn. I had beliefs that weren't very open-minded towards others. I felt like I wasn't particularly empathetic. Weirdly, through getting into animal rights campaigning has led me to change a lot of my other beliefs. As a result, at 16, I'd be the sort of person, even 15, 16, at that age, like to take the mick out of people that were vegetarian, or to look down on people that were animal lovers. I don't know. And it's like embarrassing to say now, but I've sort of come full circle, I guess. I think through opening my eyes to caring about other living beings, it's then made me a lot more aware and understanding of people's issues too. I think the two come hand in hand. I think it's why this campaigning against these particular issues are so important. There's so much overlap with other issues in society. A lot of people always say to me, there's bigger issues, the planet is falling apart, or factory farming is a greater problem than some people hunting foxes. But for me and for Protect the Wild, it's about toppling over that first domino. From where we see it, how are we able to sit there and call out others for how they're treating animals or people if society is still accepting in some way of people on horseback with a pack of hounds ripping a wild mammal to pieces? Whilst that still goes on, we can't then further animal rights as a whole. I think that's how I justify what we do, and why it's so important, because it is that first domino that I hope will fall soon. And then the next thing everyone can start looking at is our treatment of animals more generally. And as far as I'm aware, we're the only wildlife group in the UK that's run by a vegan that has those vegan principles, that every life matters. And there is a lot of hypocrisy within the wildlife protection movement of people, and speciesism, essentially, with how certain wild animals we shouldn't kill or hunt or have any form of entertainment derived from killing these particular beings. But then when it extends to people's own personal life, it's okay for them to derive enjoyment from eating an animals. And I'm trying to change that, and that will ruffle a few feathers, but I think it's the right thing to do within this space.
I want to explore more on like speciesism and the attitude towards animal rights. But first, I just want to backtrack a bit on hunting, because in that kind of intro, you listed loads of animals there that I wasn't really aware that were being hunted or that were in this kind of, that we were looking at. So can you explain a bit, just for the listeners and for me, a little bit on hunting, what is legal, what isn't, and, what's being done at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, virtually anything that moves in this country that's wild is being persecuted in some way.
Right.
So covered by the 2004 Hunting Act, you've got foxes, deer and hare are the three main wild mammals that are protected from being hunted with a pack of hounds in England and Wales. In terms of birds, you've got grouse, pheasant, partridges, and many others all being shot and killed. And then, of course, the birds of prey that predate on those game birds are then killed in order to protect those birds for other people to then go and kill. So you've got this really sick cycle of wildlife persecution taking place. You've got the UK labelled as this nation of animal lovers, and you're like, are we at all? Like, we shame Spain for bullfighting, and yet we set hounds upon.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because in the UK, it's not something you really hear much about. And like, for instance, in other countries around the world, there's also different types of attitudes towards hunting, different types of hunting. I mean, in the US, I'm not an expert, but I know that they hunt there and things like that. But it always feels like it's a bit different. Like here, it just feels a bit more like it's a fun sport and a kind of tradition. Is that the right way of putting it?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the tradition argument is the main one we hear time and time again.
Right.
But, so were many things that were so-called traditions. But just because something's got a pass and has happened for a long period of time, it isn't a moral justifier for that action to continue taking place in society. I mean, it's 2023, and I'm sat here still having to talk to people about grown adults surrounding a wooded area and sending a pack of hounds in to try and kill a fox cub, to train hounds how to kill an animal. It's just barbaric, and it's just embarrassing that there are people that wake up genuinely going out to do that. You just think there's so many other things you could be doing, like with your time and with your weekends. I mean, I'm obsessed with football. I spend most weeknights watching football matches, and and that's why we did this comparison video with saying cub hunting is the world's worst sport. And it's funny, we had this formation screen showing all of the different riders and all of the different hounds surrounding these particular fox cubs, and you had this formation of like 4-4-4-4-4-4 2 against like 3, and it's it's the most one-sided sport ever invented, and that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the cruelty that takes place. I'm now completely desensitized to all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the worst part of it. For me personally, as a job, I do hate it. Like, I don't really get any enjoyment out of this work at all. And a lot of times I'm like, would it be easier to just step back from it? Because you're constantly seeing the most messed up stuff, and then you become a bit sick in the sense of I'll see something abhorrent, like foxes literally being thrown in front of hounds. There was a recent story with the Avon Vale hunt that dug up a fox, and then they shouted brace, which means there's 2 of them, and then watched the hounds as they chase these animals. And I'm sat there like, it's great. There's footage of this. We can push it everywhere. That's more eyes on what's happening. That's more people clicking, more people signing petition to try and end it. And you're left with this weird headspace where there's part sadness and happiness in that's been recorded, that can then be shown to the public.
Bittersweet.
And it's really, it's messed up. And like, we get that with a lot of horrific things we see. I'm like, that can now be pushed out. But it's horrible stuff.
So how is it actually impacting your mental health and the people you work with, I guess? Because for me, when I was just doing my research, and I, like I said, I'm an animal lover, and I actually avoid watching things, and that's probably what a lot of people do. And even though I try my best to, do what I can, but I have to close my eyes sometimes. I have to just avoid watching it because I just can't have that picture in my head, and that kind of to know that suffering's going on. How is it actually impacting you though day to day? Like, do you feel like, okay, motivated, or do you just feel like every day it's kind of like taking a toll?
I'd love to say I do. I go through just a constant state of feeling 100% motivated, and then 0, 100, 0, 100, 0. Like, I don't know. I don't want to sound too miserable, but yeah, mentally not doing well, like at all. Lacking motivation overall. It's hard when all of the things you're campaigning for on a legal basis won't happen for a year or two because of the current government. And then you're sat there thinking, well, we can't really make any impact in this particular area when it comes to actually strengthening these laws. So that's demoralizing in itself. And then you're constantly seeing messed up stuff. You don't have, like, maybe in your day-to-day job, and most people listening to this have set targets and goals that you fulfill, and then you feel job satisfaction as a result. And then you move up and you've got this career and you are like climb that ladder. We're at a point where I very rarely feel any satisfaction. It feels like we aren't achieving much, even though we probably are, but I never see it. I'm sat all day, 9 hours behind a laptop screen, working remote. There's a team of 7 people. It's very lonely. All you see is sort of numbers and stuff on a screen in front of you, and you're not seeing the direct impact of how the things you are doing are actually helping animals. So I think it's very tricky.
I think from what I've researched, I think you're definitely making an impact. I can see the campaigns that you're trying to push through, and probably the fact that you feel like you're not means that you are, because I think if you're just head down, doing all this work, and like you said, there's a team of 7 people, and you're actually, you're a substantial, big charity trying to make movements in this kind of cause. So, I've seen the impact already just on me, and I hope that this kind of message just keeps going, really. But with that being said, going back to that kind of attitude towards animal rights and animal campaigning, something I've noticed over the years is that kind of attitude, I guess, of people that maybe, there are people that just don't care, but there are people that are kind of like, oh, well, these things happen, what can you do? But then there are those that just find it a nuisance. So what can we do to really put this message across properly without, making it sound like we're lecturing or things like that? Because I think that that's when people then don't respond as well. So what would you say, you and your team, like you're campaigning now for various things, but what would you say are the main steps to just tackle that kind of attitude towards animal rights?
Yeah, and that's the fundamental issue everyone in our space faces. You've got 2 main battles. It's how do you combat social media algorithms for the stuff you are putting out to even be seen in the first place? And then B, how do you make people that are scrolling their social media feeds look up and actually care? And you're hammering away, and sometimes you have good days and feel like, we're really getting somewhere, and other days you just like, most people aren't really interested. I was one of those people at 16 years ago seeing this stuff day in, day out of extreme animal cruelty on my feed, and it took probably a year for me for it to cut through. And most people, especially with the doom and gloom in the news about the state of the planet, cost of living crisis, and everyone is in a tough spot financially, with mental health, with everything right now. And then on top of that, we're trying to make people care about what's taking place in the countryside. And that's our major challenge, especially with people that are living in towns and even the countryside themselves. You're sat there thinking, well, I'm not hunting foxes or shooting birds. It doesn't affect me in any way. I'm not contributing to the problem, so why should I care about helping find the solution to it? And that's where we're in a different spot entirely from animal rights and vegan groups, because we're not pitching to consumers of animal products saying, we'd like you to change your ways for these reasons. We're sort of putting out a problem that isn't too relatable to people. So that's the challenge. The solution, I think, is getting animal rights and the movement we're in and our cause to break out of the echo chamber that it's been in for so long. That's why Protect the Wild and Keep the Ban was set up in the first place. Our overall mission really is to empower people to protect wildlife and to make these issues mainstream. In the same way, I think you'd agree, and people listening to this, fur is something most people have sort of shunned now and are like, that's distasteful, it's not very nice, and people don't wear it. But then 30 years ago, it was a very different picture. We want to try and get to that spot where there's just complete societal rejection of hunting, of shooting, of these so-called countryside rural traditions and pastimes. And we're trying things that haven't been done before. We're constantly doing things that I've not seen any other groups or campaigners do, because ideally that's what needs to be done. So we do things like animations. One of the things that was interesting with what you said in regards to not wanting to see violence and messed up stuff, that's the main problem we face. We had, I don't know if you saw a few years back, we funded an undercover investigation that for the first time ever exposed a hunt shooting their hounds dead. And then we put it on Twitter, Facebook, and then we're told within an hour, Twitter's blocking it. It shows violence, it shows death, it can't be pushed out. And we've got about 2,000 views on Twitter, on Facebook. Similar issue, Instagram the same. We've probably got 10,000 views in total. I mean, luckily ITV News picked up that story. And publications, as much as I don't like them personally, but the Daily Mail ran with it. And the spread of those publications is massive. I remember I was working at a warehouse in Bicester, like packing fox cub adoptions about 3 years ago. And then a worker there just mentioned it to me, didn't know anything about what we were doing, was like, oh, I saw this article in Daily Mail the other day about a hunting thing, about dogs being shot. So it's moments like that in real life with people where I actually get some degree of satisfaction that we are making an impact and these things are being seen. But yeah, long-winded reply is animations, because they're more palatable. They're very social media friendly with algorithms, and I feel like everyone likes an animation. So we've been really going hard on those. I think so far this year, we must be over 2 or 3 million views on the animations we've put out. And in this sort of short form style, and we're trying to be clever with it. So picking graphic topics and footage that traditionally TikTok, Facebook, Twitter wouldn't allow, but for some reason you animate it and then it's completely fine to show abhorrent things. So with the hound shooting, we are releasing one in October this year of a hound shooting animation, so animating what went on. Next year we do have big plans to produce a feature-length 1 hour documentary and to try and pitch that to one of the streaming platforms. I think there lacks in the online space on Netflix, Prime. It would be perfect to have a 1 hour overview of all of this stuff that's going on. We worked with a poor woman whose cat was mauled by hounds on her own front drive. There's these tragic human impact stories to do with hunting in particular. And you've just got this basically a criminal underworld taking place with all these dramatic things happening. A lot of hunt supporters and that are assaulting hunt saboteurs and monitors as well. There's so much violence. There's so much shocking stuff to do with it. And it sounds weird to say it, but that's what is going to interest the media, I think. I think it's those stories, especially human impact ones, and sort of spinning speciesism in our own favour. If people are so obsessed about humans having more intelligence and more rights and being above animals, fine. We can utilise that for advantage in the sense of we can pick up all of these stories where humans have also been impacted by hunts in order to destroy hunting and tell it from both sides of how it impacts humans and animals. It's a shame that angle has to be used, but I don't really care what methods are used to do so. Another thing in terms of what people can do, it sounds pointless to me now after having said it, but just keep backing these petitions and campaigns, because over time they do eventually achieve things. I think on a localized level too, putting pressure on your local hunt or local shoot, join a hunt sab or monitor group, get active, get in the field. You can read so much on our website about how to protect the wild. We've got a whole initiative called Protectors of the Wild, which tells you everything you need to know in regards to the laws, regulations at a national and local level in regards to all different forms of wildlife. So that's really interesting. I think pressure needs to be put on from all angles. I mean, hunts are businesses. They should be put under scrutiny by the Health and Safety Executive. They're not as of now. A current campaign we're going to be launching in the next few weeks is to try and get that done. So that should hopefully bog down hunts in loads of paperwork as well. Then you've got the insurance angle. I mean, these hunts are relying on being insured. You've then got the financial aspect, human impact, the moral arguments, of course, which are so strong in regards to these animals shouldn't be chasing other animals. And then you've got hound welfare with regards to, we had an undercover investigation with how hounds were looked after. But yeah, there's a lot coming up. Animations, a documentary, funding more undercover work, getting that on mainstream television, and then utilising social media in a clever way, telling it how it is, not producing content that's too branded, trying to, hence why I'm on this podcast, to be more person-focused with our approach, because people like people and can resonate with someone that's passionate about something, and hopefully that's an easier way to get someone to back something than just a faceless organisation.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I'm speaking the absolute lot. I'll let you speak
No, please give us all the information, because it sounds like we need it. You know, I mean, I can't even watch the animations even because I'm just very sensitive to that kind of stuff. But we need that kind of thing, and there is a gap there. You know, when I was doing some of my research, I was looking into wildlife and speciesism, which is a term I'd never heard before. And like, we just need, like you said, we need that kind of outlet. So whether it's on documentaries, which is brilliant, because I was looking for one and I couldn't find one, and on social media and just pushing it out there. So on speciesism itself, which is a word I also had to learn.
I can still hardly say it.
Can you tell us a bit more about that for people that just don't know anything about that? I mean, I know that it's kind of touching on the attitude towards other species from like a human perspective, but can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, I guess most simply it's just preference for one species over another. So saying it's wrong morally to exploit, use or abuse a particular animal, but then having, I guess, a cognitive dissonance to the experiences of other animals that are seen as lesser. In this case, within our space, a lot of people and our own supporters, I mean, it's risky saying it because a lot of people that probably donate and support Protect the Wild will perhaps fish or consume animal products or be okay with factory farming because they're getting enjoyment out of eating those animals and they're deriving pleasure from the suffering of other beings, but then are completely against animals being chased and ripped apart and other humans getting enjoyment out of that form of abuse. I don't see them as being any different. They're both exploitation of another being for personal gain, whether that's a feeling of adrenaline and fun being in a field on a horse chasing an animal, or whether you're eating a meal. I don't see there's too much difference there. So in this particular topic, speciesism refers to that
it's hypocrisy. A hard one, isn't it? Because I want this podcast to definitely touch on subjects like sustainability and just ethical topics in general. And when you dig deeper into it, you just realize how big of a system it actually is, and everything's linked. Animals, as we obviously this is the subject we're on, animals and animal cruelty, or being a vegan, vegetarian, like it all links together. And yeah, it's very overwhelming, and I think a huge thing to tackle, because like you said, when you were younger, it's not something that you necessarily thought about, and you had like a shift in you, I guess. And what does it take for other people to have that? And also, I mean, I'm a vegetarian, but it's like, but then, yeah, there are other things that maybe I'm not aware of that I'm taking part in or doing, that I'm sure lots of other people feel the same way. And it's hard not to be a hypocrite within the system. Do you know what I mean? It's like hard to break out of the system. That's what I'm trying to kind of get to.
No, it's very hard. I think why I like to open up with people about how my political and personal beliefs have changed is to then hopefully resonate with people a bit easier. And for people to think, well, I'm not perfect in any way conceivable as well, and had a lot of beliefs that I now think they're wrong, and did things where I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. And it's not about, I think vegans and people that are in this space get accused of being really preachy, lecturing people, and like you do switch off. And like that was the issue I had. Like I did switch off for ages. It took a year of being bombarded with seeing things to change. What changed for me really was feeling hypocritical, like campaigning against fox hunting in particular, but then I was still eating animals, and I was like, the two and two don't go hand in hand. I mean, it's interesting what you said regarding overlap. We campaign against the badger cull, for instance, and a lot of, if not most of our supporters are in an agreement the badger cull shouldn't be happening. But the underlying reason for the entire cull is the dairy industry. If that industry didn't exist, the 200,000 plus badgers wouldn't have been killed, of which so many have been killed without even having TB or having been tested for it.
Can you explain a bit more about that? Because I don't really know much about it.
So badgers, the claim is that badgers are responsible for the spread of bovine tuberculosis to cattle. The science is very shaky. There's some studies show there are strong links. There are other studies that show that there aren't. And the government, from where we see it, has scapegoated badgers for being responsible for spreading this disease in cattle, which leads dairy farmers to have to kill a lot of their cows. We argue that the main reason for the spread is because of poor biosecurity measures put in place by the farmers themselves. And we've got evidence that completely undermines the so-called dangers of badgers and TB. We exposed through undercover cameras a facility last year where badgers that had been killed by contractors working within the badger cull were just being dumped and left in open skips, completely against all guidelines. And then you've got dead badgers inside vehicles with blood all over the floor. And the measures in place contradict completely claims that these are disease-ridden animals that are spreading a deadly disease. If that was the case, those badgers wouldn't have been stored and really carelessly handled by contractors working within the cull. And we released that footage as proof of that. And the sad reality is, if the dairy industry didn't exist, then the underlying reasons for killing these badgers to protect cattle, which are deemed as just property of these farms, then wouldn't be happening at all. So it's a really sick cycle. You've got people looking after cows for dairy so that people can consume those products. And then you've got the spread of this disease that's been spread up and majorly impacted by poor farming methods, so cattle to cattle spread, is huge. And as a result, you've got a mass slaughter on a huge level nationally of badgers on very shaky grounds.
It's just unimaginable, isn't it?
And it might just be too late in terms of fully understanding the science behind it. In a few years, it might be the case where the government's like, we sort of got that one wrong. But yeah, in terms of overlap, that's one of the biggest ones. And it puts us in a very awkward spot because really, if you're buying any dairy products, you're supporting the badger cull. And it's a very touchy one to have to say to people. I always have the principle of just saying exactly how it is with how we run everything. I think that's the best way forwards. We don't skirt around issues or things. We don't have a sort of corporate branded way of speaking to our audience, and we never will do. It's very much a person speaking as an organisation. I think that's the best way and the quickest way of getting people on board, and it's how we've grown quickly on social media as a result as well. But it means facing up to issues like that one in particular. But yeah, in terms of making that leap or starting to think differently about animal rights, it's just opening up. It's just being open to change, I suppose.
Yeah, it's the best way, I think, because I think labels are hard, labels restrict you, and it's just about, getting as much knowledge as possible and just being honest. And like you said, when you're kind of reaching out to people, you're just person to person and you're just giving the facts and being honest. And I think that's the best way. So on that, with the campaigning that you're doing at the moment, so what are your main campaigns? And I know that one of them was, make a proper ban. So what does that mean? Because is it legal or isn't it? It's just why is it so vague? And what is the campaign about? The next campaign that you're doing, what's that about?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of England and Wales, obviously hunting was banned in 2004. The day after, hunts overnight were like, okay, we're going to start following artificial trails that are being laid as opposed to trying to hunt and kill wild mammals. Complete facade, complete smokescreen, complete sham, utter lie. Hardly any evidence or proof trails are even laid. Even if they were to be laid, there's nothing stopping hounds deviating off the supposed artificial scent that's being put across the countryside and then ripping wildlife to pieces. So that is the main challenge that we've had over the last, almost 20 years now. And credit to the pro-hunt side, they've done a very good job of muddying the waters and confusing things and creating this trail hunting myth and this sort of new form of legal and acceptable hunting as they've tried to brainwash the media and the public into believing. And it's taken years and years to sort of prove that trail hunting doesn't exist. But it's very frustrating because you're stuck in a position where you have to use the term trail hunting to disprove it happens, but then you've already lost because you're already disproving a thing that doesn't actually exist, but then you're using the term trail hunting to the public, and then they're like, well, what's trail hunting then? And then you end up on this endless... you just get lost having to explain, okay, so illegal hunting is this. They say they're doing this, but that's actually not true. Then you've got drag hunting and clean boot hunting, which is done with bloodhounds, a different form of hounds entirely, that is completely legal and is very rare that a wild animal would be killed under that form of hunting. And a lot of groups within the anti-hunt space advocate for hunts to transition from foxhounds to those other types of dogs, to bloodhounds, and do what's known as clean boot hunting that doesn't involve killing. I mean, myself on a personal level, I don't particularly think people need to be riding around on horseback with dogs, doing that form of activity. I'm quite hardline with when it comes to using animals for entertainment across the board. So that's where we've been for the last 20 years. And then you've got a hunting act that facilitates the problem. It's littered with loopholes and exemptions. You can read it almost as being pro-hunt legislation at this point, when you actually sit down and look through all the different ways hunts can get away with killing wildlife. I mean, for one, you need to prove intent in court. How you actually do that and prove a hunt deliberately chased a mammal as opposed to it being accidental, I'll never know. And that's why so many cases fail, because you can't prove that that particular hunt deliberately went after an animal. And then you've got a falconry exemption. A hunt can bring a bird of prey with them and claim that that bird of prey is being used when it never is.
It sounds all very complex.
Yeah, and then there's limitations on number of dogs involved. So what we're saying is, instead of tinkering around and asking for the current ban to be strengthened and amendments to be added, which we did campaign for the last few years, what we've seen in Scotland with the new law that's been brought in there, which looks set to completely eradicate hunting as we know it in that country, because in that law they've now banned trail hunting. So all forms of hunting are now basically over. We don't see why the same can't be done for England and Wales. We are literally the only group in England and Wales, though, that are calling for a new proper ban on this. Every other animal rights group, charity, anti-hunt organisation of any size are all on the other side calling for the current ban to be strengthened. From where I see it, it's dangerous. It allows pro-hunt interference and pro-hunt MPs to get compromise and say, okay, if we're just adding different things to it, can we have X, Y, and Z? And there's a serious risk that they sneak in something, another form of amendment that creates a brand new loophole that we can't yet see, that will just allow this to go on and on and on. And I just find it ridiculous. I mean, the act is so broken and flawed. It's going to require so much change. It's going to be unrecognisable from where it is now. I don't see why we shouldn't all be uniting for one set bill that's bulletproof, that's been written up by lawyers that we've worked with, that outlines that any form of activity involving a group of hounds is just not allowed. And overnight, we would just see an end to all of this madness that's unfolding.
Are you planning on expanding outside of the UK? Do you do any work with do you connect with any other charities abroad? Or
the UK's too screwed up.
It's enough. Yeah, I guess it's enough to do here by the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's the current, I don't know, maybe in a decade it will be Protect the Wild Holland and different countries with other issues. But yeah, I think we've got our own problems still with how we treat animals. I don't see us as being any better than any other country in regards to that side of things.
So what can people do? So for instance, in terms of wildlife in general, I know that you've got your specific campaigns that you're running, but with wildlife and wildlife rescue as well, what do you suggest? So giving you a scenario, so I was in London, obviously it's not in the countryside or anything, so that's separate to that. I just saw a fox that was injured. I think it had broken its leg, and it was obviously a London fox. But it was just like you kind of just don't know where to turn as well. I just feel like, I don't know what other countries are like, but in this country, you're just with wildlife, it's just always different. And I thought, okay, I'm going to ring the vet. That's the first thing I'm going to do, because surely they'll know, they'll give me some advice. So then they moved me on to somebody else, like another charity. And then they said that they wish they could, but they couldn't help because they don't have the staff. And then they said there was a notable charity that they said not to mention not to contact, because they might just euthanize on the spot, things like that. So then you're like going around the houses. By that point, that fox has tried to get away and it's just gone because it was in the middle of the street in a busy road in London, in like Soho, which is in the middle of the day, which is very random. So I know that you kind of work a bit separately to that, but how do you suggest people tackle that kind of thing in terms of like dealing with wildlife day to day, maybe rescue, and then separately, how can they help your causes?
It is an issue that we're trying to tackle. Like right now, we've got an interactive map of the UK on our website under our Protectors of the Wild initiative to try and help everyone become a protector of wildlife. With that map, you can click on the county that you live in or where you're from, and over time we're building up a massive list of contacts with different ways of helping wildlife. So whether that be you've seen something to do with a hunt or a shoot in the countryside, it will list all the contacts of monitor and hunt saboteur groups to give that info to, but then it also breaks down with wildlife rescue too. So the plan is it's going to become the best go-to place for all of those contact details and numbers to help wild animals, because there is a problem with that. And the issue is too, you don't always know what particular place to contact in regard to their policy with whether they euthanize or kill that particular animal or whether they give that animal a fighting chance. So slowly over time, we're trying to build that up as well. Because as of now, pretty much your best bet is Googling on the spot, I'm here, and then the animal, and then see what comes up. But over time, we're calling on the public and working behind the scenes to get this map as advanced as we possibly can and have as many different numbers and contact details as possible. I'd know off the top of my head particular rescues like the Fox Project based in like Tunbridge and Kent, or up north you've got the Fox Rescuers in terms of fox-specific places that cover quite a broad few regions, and there's a lot of really good local wildlife rescue charities, but it's about making sure they're accessible and people know who to actually be contacting. So that's our plan with how to try and combat that. We'll get there hopefully in a few months. It's going to just take a long time to build up the list of contacts.
It takes time, but that's something that we need, and that's something I've been looking for, I think, for a long time. And I think a lot of other people that are kind of conscious around animals in general and wildlife would love something like that. So that sounds great. So what's your kind of final message, I guess, to the listeners? And I mean, I'm going to note down all your where to find you, your website handles and things like that on the show notes. But what's your final kind of message to give?
Care about wildlife. Come on, please. That really, I mean, to understand the importance of why you care about wildlife does matter. That if you care about animals as a whole or living in a society that's fair, that treats other living beings with respect and allows life to thrive, then you already are a supporter of Protect the Wild and what we're about. And if you're listening to this and someone that wants to get more active, I'd recommend joining a local monitor or saboteur group in regards to trying to end hunting. If you live in the countryside, just get more active, walk around, take pictures of things that look suspicious or strange, get gamekeepers and people doing dodgy things starting to think, I better start looking over my shoulder. People are getting more informed and educated about what is happening. Head to our website, look at the Protectors of the Wild initiative, and there's so many ways you can get involved and actually make a difference, whether that's online or in the real world as well. But have a look at our ongoing campaigns. If you see one of our animations, share it around. I'm
a big follower, and I'll try and push the word out, and I'll make sure everything's in the show notes for people to to read, and on our socials as well. Amazing. Actually, I just want to end with this podcast, like I said before, I want it to be real, honest. I want it to be about various topics that are interesting, but also that touch on real life subjects, things like sustainability, things like mental health, ethics. And part of that, I'm going to do like a little interactive thing right at the end of the episode. So it's just a truth or dare, a pink Mondo truth or dare. So do you pick truth or dare?
Ooh. I'll go dare.
Dare. Okay, I like it. Gone
what
right
could these
in.
dares be in a little podcast room?
So the dare, then your dare is... Okay. You have to go litter picking this week on your walk in a pink outfit.
Oh.
And
is there any way of you proving this is done? Not that I'd lie, of course.
Yes, we will need proof.
Okay.
And this will be going on our socials.
I will do that. I will go out and get some pink clothes. I'm not sure I've got any, but I'll get some.
Brilliant.
Just for that purpose.
We can't wait to see it. And
nice.
You're making the world a better place by doing it.
Good. I like to think so, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Honestly, I really appreciate it. And I know these are subjects that are hard to talk about, and you're doing this every day, like you said, and it does take a toll, but what you're doing really does make a difference. And I'm going to really shout out about this. And thank you very much for being on the podcast. I just appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been good.
Thank you.